right, we're going to start our watercolor painting now. And we have everything we need. We're going to do a little check on this. We've got our paint, we have our brush, we have our bucket of water, and we've got some paper towels nearby. So I've got some extra over here as well. I've got my watercolor all ready to go. So I've got my clipboard here that keeps it firmly in place. And then I went ahead and applied some optional washi tape just to give myself a nice clean border around the edges as well. So to get started, I'm going to start by using this brush that came with the kit here. And I'm going to start by doing the sky first. So I'm going to be using a little bit of this blue here, and then I'm also going to mix in a little bit of this kind of a beautiful green color, so it'll make a nice little teal in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit of water to the brush here, and go ahead and let this start to soak into the paint, get that moistened a little bit more. And then I'm going to go ahead and push into this as well. So I want a nice soft mix between the two. And I can actually go back and forth into both of these as I apply this into the sky. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit more water here. So the more water I have, the more I have fluid wash coming over the top. So I'm going to go ahead and do a light wash. That's a little bit dark and garish, so I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit more water here to let this spread out a little bit more evenly over the background. I'm going to go ahead and keep pushing into both of these colors. If you do get some big spots in there, you just want to make sure and keep working a lot of this water into it. And then that will help spread it out. All right, so that's a nice, beautiful wash over the sky. And the next thing that we will do, we're just gonna kind of work down here, and I'm gonna go ahead and apply some beautiful greens into the tree here. And I like to do a little bit of a pounce effect here, so I kind of do a little bit of a tap, tap, tap on the end of the brush, and that gives some nice texture. You can also add some nice highlights in here too if you want some golden highlights. We've got some pretty gold in here too, so I'll go ahead and moisten that up and apply that as well. And just continue that little tap, tap, tap motion with the brush. Right. The next round of color will be for the barn, and so I'll be working with a balance of browns and golds. And so I'll just continue to go ahead and work into the water. I want to pre-moisten this a little bit. And then if you want to clean up the gold a little bit, we can do that too. So you just want to add a little bit of water, take your paper towel, and just kind of clean that up, because we do want to go ahead and, I want that green out of there. So I'm going to start fresh, and I've got some of this gold here to work into. And then with the brown. So I'll be working this into the barn area. And if you want to add some dark shadows in here, you can do that as well. Mixing in a little bit of black here and there is also helpful for little shadows. So see, that darkens it up a little bit. And remember, if it gets a little bit splotchy, you can add a bit more water to it to kind of help soften and smooth it out. And then also keep in mind too that old distressed barns, you do have some splotches of color in there that gets a little bit more concentrated. Sometimes that can be a nice little happy accident where it just adds to the imperfection of the barn. It's a nice effect. And then I'm coming in with some black to go over some of those black areas, just to go ahead and darken that back up a little bit. And I notice I have a few little trees over here playing peekaboo on me, so I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more green back into that area. A little friendly fly visiting us today. All right, next up is the truck, and I would like for it to be turquoise to match the sky. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work that into this background here. right, I'm gonna soften up this door a little bit to where it's a little bit more faded on the side. And so I want to go ahead and make a little bit of wetness with the color, but then I'm going to go ahead and just clean off my brush completely, just go straight water now at this point and kind of softly fade into that. And in that way I'll create a soft fade into the white. And then I'm also going to pick up a little bit of that gold, kind of lightly go over the door too, so it's got a little bit of that gold happening. That way the door looks old. Okay, awesome. All right, now for this wooden area here. The colors are going to be similar to what's happening with the barn again. So we've got some brown and some gold happening. Mostly gold though. A little bit of white, kind of soften that up a little bit. All right, then I'm going to come back in with a little bit more of this turquoise around the edge. And I've got a little bit of the inside of the pickup. And then I'm noticing some peekaboo happening. We're looking through the truck, so I need to go ahead and do the background here. So I've got a little bit more of that green happening with the trees. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of lightly pounce that in here. And then I've got my barn showing through here too, so I'm going to go ahead and pick up a little bit more of that gold, brown. I'll go ahead and fill that in. All right. Then I've got some gray, so I'm going to go ahead and put some water on that and do some gray on the tires here. And then I'm going to go ahead and work on parts of my little chicken right here too. I'm going to start to add in lots of detail here. Now this is when you don't want as much water. You want to make sure that maybe you kind of blot it just a little bit. You do want to wet your paint here and get that going, but then you don't want too much water because it'll just kind of spill over into areas where you don't want it. So you do want to go ahead and moisten the paint. Make sure that you can dip into it. But right before I go into areas of the chicken that I'm going to go ahead and paint, I am going to go ahead and blot the brush a little bit just to make sure I don't have too much water coming onto the surface area. I am doing some very tiny areas right here. And then I want some darker, more exotic blues happening here on the tail feathers. But again, I don't want too much water, so I'm going to blot it just a little bit. You see how dramatic and beautiful that is. So just do tiny amounts here on the tail feathers. And then I'll come in with a little bit of gold over here, this center part of the body of the chicken. And I want to make sure that it's a bit more concentrated with color so that it has a lot more impact. All right. Now we've got some winter grass that we can go ahead and start to fill in here. So I'm going to go ahead and keep the colors kind of light and more neutral. And I'll do touches of green, but mostly I'll keep it quite a bit more golden. And I'm going to go ahead and keep my strokes very much like, grass-like. So I'm going to go ahead and start to pull up like this to add a little bit of texture at times. Maybe touch into a little bit of brown here and there. Some shadows coming, so I'm going to go ahead and keep this a little bit brown over the top. And I actually really appreciate the resist of the ink that's already there. It's kind of a nice little texture that I like. I'm going to go over this with a little bit more green now. So touches here and there. And I like this pounce effect again. And do a little pounce effect over the top here. Just add that subtlety of green over the top. And I'm going to come back in with more gold over the top of my trees too. All right, so I want a little bit more contrast with my barn. It's got a nice base with the brown, but I'm going to come in with touches of red so that it looks like an old red barn at this point. And this is when I do want a little bit more water, so I want more of a light wash over the top. And I'm going to come back in with a little bit more of the green. Just to kind of, because they're coming in over the top with perspective, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of pounce over these little corners just a little bit more here. And then here. And then I want this contrast here too, a little bit. I'll do a little bit of that pounce and also in a vertical stroke, so it looks like little bits of grass coming up over the top. All right, so a couple of options now. We've got really good coverage over the top here. And again, this is most definitely just a really helpful experience for those of you who are just wanting to play with watercolor for the very first time and get a feel for it. So this gives you a lot of confidence because all the line work, of course, is done for you. You can leave this as is because our lettering, especially here at the top, it's already a nice brush stroke. It's on there. It's still showing through very vividly. It's quite a bit more washed out on the truck, but if you do want to go through and add a little bit more impact with the lettering, you can do so carefully with just really small amounts of water. This again is when you want to do a light little blot because you don't want too much water to pull out. But you can go over your lettering just a little bit with that fine point to give it a little bit more impact. So you can see how that really makes it more impactful over the surface. But this does take a really fine hand, steady hand, and you just want to barely go into that area. And I like to add a few little, this is that black, so I'm just kind of re-emphasizing some of the planks of wood. Giving a little bit of a shadow to it. All right, so we have really good coverage here. And again, this is just a beautiful beginner's start to watercolor. So it's a great introduction. You don't have to worry about drawing. It gives you a chance to play with the paint a little bit, get a feel for it, and without having to be concerned about learning how to draw. So great experience here with this. Now let me go ahead and pull off the washi tape so you can see how nice that is, because it will lift right off. And it will give you a really pretty border at the end. Ta-da! All right. And when this dries, and you will want to frame this, because if it is left out, again, watercolor paper has a tendency to have a little bit of a wave to it, especially when water is added to it. So you'll want to get this into a frame, but it is lovely and beautiful. So there it is. There's our beautiful watercolor.